What's the weirdest thing you've seen happen at a friend's house that they thought was normal? I've got one from the opposite perspective. So to paint the picture, I invited a few people over for my 10th birthday party. The plan was a sleepover with video games and board games. Sounded great to my nerdy friends and I. Well, the day of the party comes along and one of my friends gets dropped off by the school bus with me. We walk inside and there's no pizza yet and the cake hasn't been picked up. I ask my dad and he starts screaming about how my mom will pick them up on her way from work. She won't be home until 7 p.m. at the earliest, and my friends will be arriving around 4 p.m. After my friend and I left the room, my friend, from now referred to as Mark, not his name, asked me if something was wrong and why my dad was so mad. It was normal for him to be that mad when he forgot something. The rest of my friends show up around 4 p.m. Friends Bill, Bob, and Frank, also not their names. I offer them fruit snacks when they arrive and tell them pizza should be there around 7:30 p.m. So we're taking turns on Gran Turismo 4 when Bill asks if my parents are home. He'd like to meet them. I tell him that my dad's home, but he's sleeping right now as he gets up kinda early. This was a lie. He was taking his medicine, what I'd later that evening find out was illegal substances, and would be occupied for a while, and my mom would be getting out of work around 7 p.m., which was true. The lie seemed to work and we continued playing games. 8 p.m. rolls around and my mom gets home. She has no pizza or cake. I greet when she comes into the living room. She asks us if we ate the pizza and cake already. I tell her that Dad told us she'd be getting them. She asked where my dad was, so I told her their bedroom. She said she'd be right back and went to the bedroom. It wasn't long before you could hear them clearly screaming at each other. I noticed them arguing and making my friends uncomfortable, but I was unfazed. It was then that I realized that what was going on wasn't normal. I felt awful. I told my friends that my parents would likely be arguing most of the night, and if they wanted to go home, I'd understand. They all wanted to go home. Due to the layout of the home, the kitchen was closer to the bedrooms than the living room, and that was where their phone was. So I went with each of my friends to the kitchen so they could call their parents to be picked up. The front door was also closer still. They each took turns calling their parents. I had to talk to Frank's parents for him as he was too shaken by what was going on. All the parents were there within the hour and picked up my friends. Mark was the last one to be picked up and asked if I wanted to hang out at his place for the night. I told him that if my parents found out I left without telling anyone, especially if I didn't leave a note saying where, they'd be even more angry. And I told him that I couldn't leave a note saying where I was going as I didn't want to have his parents dragged into it. We hugged and he left. My parents finished screaming at each other around 11 p.m. when my dad left screaming about going to his buddy's place for the weekend. I was reading a book in the living room when my mom walked in and saw that everything was put away and all my friends were gone. She asked me where they went. I'll never forget the pain in her eyes when I said they each called their parents and went home already. For what I thought was normal, I thought everyone's parents argued endlessly. I thought everyone had a parent that they lied for. I thought everyone's parents lied to them constantly. I thought everyone's parents got angry at them without prompting. I thought everyone always looked for exits upon entering a new place. I thought everyone knew how to act without being seen. I thought everyone knew how to act under pressure. I haven't celebrated a birthday since, or even tried. I feel no drive to celebrate it, as all it does is remind me of that and many other horrible things around that time. I'm still friends with Mark all these years later. He's one of my only friends and he's by far my closest friend. Story 2. Here's an I Was That Family story. My godmother, who was practically an aunt, ran a fairly successful daycare out of her home in the 90s. She was a first-generation immigrant to the U.S., whose parents came to the New England area from Ireland. My 2 younger brothers and I spent a lot of time at her home, and I was generally the oldest child there. When I was about 8 years old, she started to have me make her favorite drink, gin and tonic. She drank these all day while running her home daycare. At age 8, I knew how to mix cocktails, that forks were better for stirring than spoons, and that large plastic bottles of gin were cheap and low quality. This went on for years, on pretty much a daily basis until my family moved out west. My godmother kept her daycare running until she died. I'm sure of health problems relating to alcohol. I was 15 when she passed and I'm in my 30s now. I honestly went most of my life thinking nothing of it until I became a father a couple of years ago, at which point I was like, how the hell did anyone let her have a daycare? Side note, I drank, but would consider myself an average drinker, if not below average. With that being said, I could never stomach the thought of gin and didn't try gin until I was 30. This was because I once licked my finger early in my daycare bartending career. After a couple of drops of gin splashed on my hand as I was pouring, that plastic half-gallon quality gin was the worst thing I'd ever had in my life, and I had no idea how my godmother liked it so much. It completely ruined my taste for gin. At 8. Daycare bartending career cracked me up. Story 3. So when I was younger, my dad passed away. My mom remarried and had 2 kids. I was moved into the basement, unfinished basement. I didn't think anything of it since I was 10. I had a sheet blocking my area from the laundry area. It had bare concrete walls, wood beams, and piping across the ceiling and cement flooring. I used a heater and dehumidifier because it was cold and humid. When I used the heater, my parents would make my sheeted area around my bed so it would heat up the space quicker. Parents didn't allow any of my friends over, and my brother and sister weren't allowed in my room. Distant family members also never stayed over when we had a family gathering. I was told to go into the guest room instead of my room while they were there. I thought, cool, I have a huge room and no one can mess it up. My family would go on vacations yearly without me from when I was 12 till I was 18. I was the dog and house watcher. During one of those vacations when I was 17, I invited a friend to come over. They pointed out how messed up it was that there were bedrooms fully furnished with TVs for my brother and sister, a guest room fully furnished as well with a TV, and how I was in the basement with sheets for walls and bathroom mats on the floor. I completely dismissed it because it was normal to me. It wasn't until I was 20 that I found out that the family trips that I didn't go on were paid for with money that I was getting from my dad passing away. I'm sure I got some of the money and food and clothes and whatever I needed, but it's got me pretty messed up because my brother and sister don't have any memory of it, and when I talk about it, they always back my parents by saying we were raised right, and I opted out of vacations. They also thought the guest room was my room. Man, I'm so sorry this happened to you. And I'm sorry to say this, but your mother is a disgrace. It's clear to see what happened here. I sincerely hope you're doing good now and making the most of your life. Story 4. My family was very comfortable and my mom always babysat lots of kids from around the neighborhood. Basically, her place was just where the kids hung out. Once there was an emergency with my dad and my mom really needed somebody to watch me overnight, and I wound up with one of the families that she babysat for. They were really nice people, and I was close friends with their kids, obviously, because they were at my house every day. It was a new experience, though. This was the first time I'd ever seen people living in real poverty. I was kind about it and didn't say anything, but parts of it were a real shock to me. The toilets didn't work, but they had just continued to use it to the point that it was piled up to the seat. We had to unscrew the light bulb to turn off the lights because the switch would shock you if you touched it. I felt really bad for them. It was just a real eye-opener for me as a kid, and it gave me a much better understanding of exactly why my mom babysat and fed all those kids. Story 5. Stayed at a friend's house when I was probably 10 or 11, and we had a sleepover one night, and we were up really late playing games and just talking. Around 3 to 4 a.m., his dad comes in, frantic, saying that he heard someone breaking in upstairs, and that we needed to leave immediately. Anyways, we walk out of the house, and he tells the neighbor that they needed to leave too. The neighbor looked extremely worried and pulled her phone out. We drive to a place and he gets us some food, and eventually an ambulance comes. So does the neighbor along with it, because apparently the father was schizophrenic and having an episode. There was really no break-in. Obviously, my friend now knows this, but back then, we genuinely believed him. This is actually just really sad. He genuinely believed this guy was in danger and wanted to protect him. Story 6. Was sleeping over at a friend's house in 6th grade. At 3 p.m., we showed up to her house after school. We walked into her apartment to find her mom half-dressed, passed out drunk, and sprawled out with her head on the floor, one arm twisted weirdly so it somehow was resting on the coffee table, and her legs on the couch. TV was on and blaring, didn't even notice our arrival. I had zero experience with this kind of thing, and although I could tell my friend was embarrassed, I didn't understand the full implications or really what was happening. I pretty much just thought it was an odd place for a nap, which is how I explained it to my parents later when I commented on how odd it was to be napping there instead of in the bed. I might have even asked them if they would let me sleep on the couch and watch TV too. Bless my parents for immediately understanding the situation but not making a scene and not spoiling my naivete or ever embarrassing my friend in any way. My family is pretty good at being subtle, for better or worse. However, that was absolutely the last time I stayed at her house. All sleepovers with that particular friend were at my house from then on, but it was a casual coincidence from my POV. I didn't even notice that subtle change for a couple of years. Looking back, I think my friend really appreciated it though. We're still friends and she has kids of her own and she's doing great. Is a doctor. But her mom still has the same alcohol struggles and is very in your face about it even now as she was then. My parents weren't perfect by any means, no one is, but they did really well in situations like that. Sadly, I had multiple friends who had similar problems at home, so I'm sure my parents were always a wreck worrying about me falling into the wrong crowd. But my overwhelmingly innocent childish outlook on the world was an incredible shield. I was basically a My Little Pony or a Sesame Street character who had somehow found my way into the set of brick and hadn't noticed. I flitted through adolescence playfully and without even realizing that my friends had started to experiment, even though they were literally doing most of it practically in front of me in the next room at parties and stuff, as they explained to me years later in high school. I literally just never picked up on any of it. I think that the first time any of them ever heard me swear was in 10th grade, and it practically made headlines in my friend group because of the milestone. Your parents are awesome for letting you stay friends with her and invite her over to your house. Some people would force their child to stop being friends with a kid because she's a bad influence even though the child is not at fault at all. Oh, and since you're already halfway through the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Story 7. My childhood best friend lived with his grandparents. His grandfather was a clockmaker. He mostly restored them. Their large 2-story house walls were covered in old restored grandfather and cuckoo clocks. Each one had a small sticker with a number so he could keep track of them all. The highest number I saw was over 700. I would say 25% of them were rounded, so every hour you were treated to a symphony of clocks. I didn't appreciate it when I was a kid, but those clocks were fantastic pieces of workmanship. Another one when I was in high school. A friend asked me and two other friends to his house for dinner. His mom served homemade bean soup, which was very good. Toward the end of the main course, she brought out chocolate cake for dessert. She cut each of us a slice and plopped it onto our bowls, in which we still had about an inch of soup. Us guests exchanged puzzled glances, but the family dug right in. So apparently chocolate cake soaked in bean soup was an ordinary thing for them. Story 8. Here's a few. This happened when I was like 6. I needed to use the bathroom at a friend's house, and he led me to his parents' bathroom. The place was filled with crap of all sorts. Boxes, magazines, an inflatable pool, lots of other stuff. You could barely get in there. He pulled out a drawer from the installed cabinet by the entryway and said to pee in there. I thought he was joking until he went ahead and peed in there himself. I couldn't argue with that, so I too peed right in there. Then he shut the drawer and we went and played more Ninja Turtles. I have no idea what became of that drawer or house or family. Rich friends' family had rooms not touched in weeks that had vomit on the bed sheets from one of their parties. Saw my friend spit in her house, straight onto the carpet. I didn't go back. When I was a kid, the neighbor's TV was always at 75% volume or higher. They'd literally sit in the living room and scream at each other over the TV on blast. One time I was at my friend's house while his dad was working late. His mom brought home 2 Little Caesars pizzas for us, his brother, and his parents. By the time his dad got home from work, there was no pizza, so his dad just made himself a salad for dinner and no one got screamed at until they cried. I have an opposite one because I had a weird family. In high school, I had a sleepover and one friend went to the kitchen in the middle of the night and saw my dad inebriated, in his underwear and stained shirt on his knees in front of the fridge drinking mustard out of the bottle. Monday rolls around and the rumors have spread and I was like, wait, all your dads don't do that too? Lol. By the way, he did in fact have his own separate mustard bottle. I had a friend in high school whose mother was from Jamaica. His family would colon cleanse together every year. I guess it was a customary from his mom's culture, so literally they'd take medicine to make themselves crap their brains out for a day or two every year. Notable mention, they only had one bathroom. Story 9. One of the first times I met my husband's family. I was over at their house and my husband gestured for me to sit down and be comfortable. Their house was really very cluttered. Not quite hoarder cluttered, but close. They had a couple of couches facing each other and then some other chairs. Not knowing the rules, I sat on one of the couches, which had a lot of stuffed teddy bears on it. Oh my god, you would think I had sat down on live bears. There were probably 20 to 30 small medium stuffed bears on this couch. Husband's mother and twin brother both visibly reacted as if I had damaged the bears. Not antique bears either. That was when I was told that the couch was for the bears and only for the bears and that no one was allowed to sit on the bears' couch. Just the bears. The bears all had little beaded necklaces with their names on them to tell them apart because they were all the same brand and style. And you married him after the bear seating snafu? Story 10. I'll be the weird family, although this doesn't quite fit the normal since no one thought it was normal. I was about 12 or 13 and had a huge zit on my bum that was incredibly painful and it was deep under the skin. I couldn't pop it no matter what, and in my extreme pain sitting down, I asked my dad to pop it. He said alright, my dad then put on gloves to pop the zit. Anyway, in the middle of all this, my sister's friend, girl at 10 or 11, walked in on us at full speed as we were behind a wall that connects the hall sector to the living room, so she was really close. She gasps and walks out of the room. Yeah, there we go. Yes, the girl popped, one of those water-containing zits that caused a lot of pain. In Croatia, we don't make a big deal out of accidents like this, nor is something like this inherently abnormal. It was the lack of context and the swiftness of it that got her, and she just bolted out. Our living room is on level 2/3 of our house, and you can hear people coming from the stairs up into the hallway. Except this time the door was closed and it was a slightly chubby little girl, so we didn't hear her until she burst into the room. I was about 11 or 12 and my sister was 9. I had zits on my bum and asked my sister if it was visible since we were off at a really old mortar house in the hills where my grandma lived at the time. Mortar built, old windows, air was stale AF, and we were sweating like pigs in a summer night in old bedsheets that did not let air pass. The house is on a hill before a mountain covered in trees that block fresh air at night. She said she'll take a picture with a phone so I can see. Anyway, 6 months later while my friend is scrolling my phone to find a picture I took of him, he finds the zit pictures. The reaction was a weird look. Lol. Also, my other grandma told us once she used to eat chicken crap as a kid and as well as pieces of walls along with other kids. I never had to examine what I just heard so much at the time. Don't think I processed that well. Ain't the half of what I've seen there. Story 11. I celebrated Christmas with my high school girlfriend's family one year. It was her mother's turn to open her presents, and she opened one from her daughter, then one from her other daughter, then finally one from her husband. Then her husband started pulling tiny hidden gifts from his wife from everywhere. Earrings from the couch cushions, necklaces, bracelets, a bag of candy, and flowers. He had at least a dozen presents hidden everywhere from behind the curtains, in a lampshade, behind the TV, in a closet. They just kept coming and he had the biggest grin on his face. When he was done, he wished her a Merry Christmas, told her he loved her, and kissed her right in the mouth in front of me. It was wonderful, but extremely weird to me. It wasn't until that display of love for his wife that I realized that it was mainly to be romantic and to show love and affection. Her parents were wonderful people, and will always regard them as role models. I hope they're doing well all these years later. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy What's the Strangest Rule at a Friend's House story. Story 3 was incredibly strange. See you in that video.